Welcome to another episode of Agency Edition. This is a toggle series for agency leaders who want to grow their business. Today, I'm talking to Hannah McClenaghan. She's the operations manager at Talkshop Media, a communications agency that's spread across Vancouver, Toronto, and LA that's been operating for 15 years. Now, today's episode is a look at what makes an agency hum. It's people. As Hannah explains, one of the agency's core values is care wildly. And I wanted to find out what that meant and how that value transitions from manifesto on paper to the agency's day-to-day working structure. The bulk of our conversation dug into how Hannah and the management team handle team workloads and how they structure people to be more efficient. Hannah was also pretty open about how the agency takes a proactive approach to handling burnout by checking in on team members and also tracking utilization rates in custom dashboards just to make sure nobody's overloaded. We also talked about the agency's proactive approach to capacity planning and how that helps with retention, and how since they started using time tracking 12 months ago, the agency finally understands how and where the team is spending its time. Here is my interview with Hannah McClenaghan. All right, Hannah, thanks so much for joining us. I'd love it if you could just give us a little intro about yourself, your role, and what Talkshop Media does.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me. I'm Hannah. I am our operations manager at Talkshop Media. My role is to do everything and nothing at the same time. It oscillates between super high level and trying to figure out how best to steer our ship in terms of like processes and systems and workflows, and then also down to the minute admin details of setting those things up. I basically work behind the scenes to support our team to do the best and most efficient work that they can. And Talkshop Media as a whole, we are an integrated communications agency based out of Vancouver, Canada, with offices in Toronto and LA, shout out. And we service our clients in a variety of needs. Our bread and butter, what we were built on, was media relations and public relations, but we have a full suite of services as we've grown over the last 15 years to include a complete social and digital team. Our team in the US handles a lot of like profile building. Actually, our entire team handles a lot of like profile building, thought leadership, pretty much runs the gamut in terms of communications services.
So a lot going on. How many people do you have? Number one. And two, can you just walk me through a little bit about the team structure? I'd love to know what that looks like in terms of, do you have different teams for different services, or are they all kind of multi-skilled and they are spread about? How does that makeup look?
So we've got 3 teams in a way that are geographic specific. We've got a team in the East in Toronto, a team in the West in Vancouver, and a team in LA. And I would say that client and service spread is sort of spread across those 3 offices. Within that, we have actually transitioned to a more collaborative and integrative approach amongst our teams within those markets. Um, and we have a PR team or a more traditional communications team. And then we've got a social and digital team as well. And I'd say that's the only place where we really have a hard line right now in terms of services. And we work collaboratively. Like, we have members of PR and digital in every market. And this is somewhat new to us. We used to segment our client portfolio and our teams both geographically and then by sort of service mix, and then by industry. And we used to have like a third tier where we had sort of like group 1, group 2, group 3, et cetera, et cetera. And we've since sort of lifted that layer of industry specifics because we're finding that as an agency, we want to be more fluid and adaptable and hire more generalists than niche industry players, just to allow us to service a broader mix of clients.
It's just really interesting that you say that, because I was interviewing someone earlier this week actually for this series, and she was saying it sounds like their agency's kind of set up the same as yours in the sense that they do social media, but instead of hiring like a TikTok specialist and an Instagram specialist and all this, they hire kind of generalists, but people that are really good at kind of general tasks. And like, someone will do strategy, but they can do strategy for like multi like video platforms kind of thing. And it sounds like you've got the same setup by removing that third layer that you have. Was that the idea behind that you'd be able to like service more things with these experts?
A little bit, and it actually simplified a lot of the administrative burdens on our team.
Okay.
There's a multitude of things that go into it, but when we set it up in our group structure, there was a lot more administrative back and forth for those group leaders because we set it up as their own like mini business within the business.
Mhm.
So it was like they were responsible for things like overseeing like their headcount and payroll and hiring, et cetera. And we've consolidated that a little bit more to be like a central service for the agency, whereas we had kind of broken it up. Some of those more like administrative or operational functions now live with a more centralized team and allows the team to do more meaningful client work than like manage a mini business. It also became a little bit as the economy shifts and, as like the news cycles, everything is shifting in like the communications and media world. I think we also recognize that even when we have new clients to come in and service it, we really want to put the best people on that specific account. And where we had kind of pigeonholed ourselves was like, well, we'd have to give it to a subset of, this team or that, versus being like, we have this amazing team member in Toronto with like deep fintech experience. And then we've got this like amazing strategist in Vancouver. Prior to the model that we're in now, those worlds wouldn't really collide. Whereas now we can actually like holistically step back, be like, we have this amazing account coming in. Who are the best people cross agency to work on this? Let's get that group up and running and then send them on their way.
I'd love to know what that looks like in a real setting. Just say this client comes in and you need this specialist niche knowledge. And as you said, someone's in Canada, someone's in LA. How does that look practically setting it up? Have you got people tagged with certain kind of knowledge in your system? Is it the manager just knows this from an
Mhm.
operational perspective? What does
Mhm.
that look like? Because you don't have a small team.
No,
So
we don't have a
unless
small
Hannah's
team.
there saying that person, they know a lot about fintech, what does that look like?
So yeah, we have a team of about 50,
Mm.
between 40 and 50 right now. And so I would say that is where we want to go. Right now, this is still relatively new, like within the last kind of half year that we've transitioned to this model. Right now, it does look like that like individual like knowledge, kind of like the VPs in every market are responsible for coming together, looking at the spread of accounts and understanding who's going to be resourced on what. We have a workflow in Slack that prompts people to say like, hey, when you sold this, like the person who sold it, were there any team members in mind, or do you have any recommendations on who you would like to be or who you wrote into the proposal to be considered at the resourcing step? But I would say that um it's still manual, and I would love to get to a place. I have this in my notes of like how I want to set up like our project management and just systems in general of how to tag people with like specific skills or industries to make that process a little bit easier. But also operationally so that's more so from the resourcing side of like how are you going to put people, like who's going to work on this account. Operationally within Toggle and some of the other platforms that we use, I actually, for a while, we were trying to keep up with, what team members are on what accounts and let's add them and take them off and do this. And I really, about 3 months ago, I took a step back and I was like, you know what? We should just have a PR team in Toggle. That's part of the template. And we have a social and digital team. And then we have an integrated team, which is just everyone. And I think that where I thought there would be overwhelm in people who are like, oh, I have accounts, I can find projects that are not part of my repertoire. I thought that it would be overwhelming for them. Turns out it's not. And it's a lot easier for me to just be like, okay, this is like more of a PR based, it's either a PR retainer or like communications retainer, social digital, or it's both. And it has cut down my admin time probably by 20%, I'd say.
So you have three workspaces essentially, one with PR and then another with another team and then an overall. Is that what you mean?
In terms of like the teams in Toggle, I've got 3 teams. Yeah. Whereas before we had, I think almost 7 teams because it was that group structure that I
Yeah.
was talking about. But as we transitioned we had clients that were maybe like a traditional group 1 client, but then we'd have one person from group 8. There was a cascade of people being like, hey, can you add me to this project? Can you add me to this project? Can you take me off this project? Or not even take me off. Everyone was like, could you add? Could you add? Could you add? And I was like, you know what? Let's take it back.
So just say someone has 15 hours already allocated that they need to be working on a week, and then you've changed it up so there's this other layer where they might see projects that they're like, I would be great on that. I want to be on that. What do they do? Do they ask you to go on that? Do they self-allocate themselves? How does that work?
They wouldn't self-allocate themselves. Actually, you know, that's so interesting. I've never even thought about that from our team's perspective. They would chat with their manager. If there was something that they really wanted to be on, they'd be like, hey, can I be on that? I would imagine that if that were to happen, we would absolutely prioritize that request. Like, what we want at the end of the day across any of our clients is our team to be like, I'm stoked to work on this client. So
Yeah.
I think if somebody raised their hand, absolutely, we'd be like, for sure, you can definitely work on that team.
I just think it's really interesting because the whole reason I wanted to talk to you today was about kind of workflow planning and retaining and keeping
Mhm,
employees happy. And I just feel like even at the early part of this conversation, even that manual work that goes in when you're handing over clients from, you've won them over, you've won the contract, and now they're getting onboarded, even that kind of manual element
mhm,
of knowing, X would be great for this project, that just
mhm.
shows that you've got people that have been, they know the team and they know the skill sets quite intimately to be able to even add that layer, especially with 50 people,
Yeah.
So even when we're talking about these things, I'm like, your team seems to have been around, correct me if I'm wrong, for more than a couple of months if they're making those recommendations.
Yes.
So yeah,
Mhm.
I guess
Everybody
it
at
just shows how important it is to keep employees happy, to keep the process that you've got going.
Yeah, I would say like it's something that we're always working on, and it's interesting. Sometimes I think it can be a double-edged sword because I'm like, it's something that we're always trying to work on and improve. And I would say we put employee satisfaction like very high on in terms of our matrix of decision making as a leadership team. And sometimes I think, and I'm guilty of this myself, sometimes I think that you can take like when it is so good, you focus sometimes on the smaller things that like wouldn't really make a big difference if you were in a place where it wasn't. I think that sometimes it does beget actually sometimes dissatisfaction in small ways that when you're able to see the big picture, you think, oh, maybe that wouldn't like impact me as an individual, but at that level it would like it would make a difference in your work life. But to me it seems like a smaller thing because I know the bigger picture of how we allocate and how we are really thoughtful with our resources and really thoughtful with what we do for the team. So it is a bit of a double-edged sword, and I'm going to sound super negative, but we do really put in a lot of effort into how we set up and how we manage our team's workflow, how we manage those hours, and we're always trying to improve. Which I personally, that's what keeps me around at Talk Shop. I feel like we are someone, well, many things. I love working here, but we're always trying to figure out, is there a better way to do this? Give me the feedback. If we can do something about it, we will. If you have a better way, show me. If it's great, we'll tell everyone. So I do love that. You're right. Our leadership team, the people who are in the seats of, sort of like working to push the business forward and see those workflows from a really like large lens, they have been around the table for years and they do know our team really well. And it's super invaluable. And I think we've always known that, but I think now it's becoming more and more apparent to us the value that that holds.
Yeah, I guess that opens up kind of a broader question of, what was the catalyst for Talkshop having such a focus on team health? At such a top level,
Mhm.
is it a business decision? Is it to keep the team happy? Is it a mix of everything? Why the focus on team health in that sense? Because to open the question up on a broader level, I don't think that's always the case
See,
that an agency works like that.
And I agree, which is why, like, where I say, like, it's a bit of a double edged sword of like, I
Hmm.
don't know that people know within our organization because it's maybe I think the people around the leadership table that have like a little bit more industry experience and the people that have either worked there for a long time or come to us from somewhere else, I think that they do understand, like, oh, wow, this is different. But maybe for someone who's a bit more junior, who hasn't worked in an agency before, who's coming to us, might just feel like the norm. Like, oh, well, this is just like you kind of hit the jackpot on your first
Mm.
go, in my opinion. But I think it stems from two things. One, I'm a bit of a feminist and we are a fully like women owned and founded business. And I think just leading with that empathy, understanding, and that lens has been a part of our ethos from day one. We are an extremely like family friendly workplace, and I think that we do our best to support the individuals across the board with whatever they need in their work lives, in their personal lives, etc. So I think it started there, and I think that they just attracted people who also valued that. Like one of our core values is care wildly, and we adopted that. Original value was called keeping good company, and the little kind of ethos was like, they say you can tell a lot by the company you keep, and so we keep great company. And we wanted to do a values refresh a couple years ago, and we did a whole survey across the team, what lands or what doesn't, or what do you think about, how would you describe Talk Shop, etc. And one theme that came up time and time again was that people really cared about each other. People really wanted other people to succeed. They wanted to have FaceTime with you and know you on a level that was a little bit more than surface. And so we adopted our value to care wildly. And I think that just shows up in every level of our organization.
I think, these slogans that companies have, every company has a slogan. It might not be
Yeah.
care wildly, but it might be something else. And it's kind of like, I think maybe this is more philosophical on my end, but the older I get and the more jobs I have and stuff, some companies actually, like, these values mean something. Like, they really act by them, the team acts by them, people like believe it. And then sometimes it's like, okay, like, whatever. Like, you have that on your website, but it's not really a thing. So I guess my question on the back of that is, have you noticed that the kind of the love and the care that the team has to care for each other and things like that, have you noticed how that impacts your workload and like retention and average tenure? Is that something that you actively track, or is it just like a gut feel?
We do track it. I mean, like we definitely look at our turnover rates, again, more so at the leadership and like partnership level.
Mm-hmm.
We look at turnover rates and we run an ENPS survey about once, like biannually, I would say. Um, And we do dig into that data quite a bit. I don't know that we've been able to really like find that dotted line or that correlation between like efficient systems and workflows and burnout versus like employee retention. I don't know that we're quite there yet. I've got high hopes. I do know that we track like on a month over month and really like quarter by quarter, we look at people's resourcing or capacity again on that manual, like with that manual process that I was talking about. And we do look for trends of, has so and so had a really heavy few months, and does that warrant some in lieu time? It's a very like case by case, and like to be totally transparent, like it's a very gray area. Like sometimes it
Mm-hmm.
makes more sense than others, but it's always on our team's radar, and it'll always be a conversation, whether it's, sort of like, hey, this was a one off and we'll just, take a flex Friday. All of our Fridays are flex Fridays, in which case, if you have been sort of burning the midnight oil, you're encouraged to kick off and work with your team and be like, hey, I'm not available Friday afternoon, or book appointments, or generally just like flex. Our office is closed on Fridays, and the mandate is like avoid internal meetings at all costs. Sometimes it happens, like, we work in a business that's open
Mm-hmm.
Monday, Friday, 9 to 5. So yeah.
I think the meeting thing is definitely a theme. I'm noticing such a like, do not even book it on there unless there's like a clear schedule and there's a
Mhm.
clear goal at the end. So you're definitely not alone on that one. But in terms of when you just said burning the midnight oil, what does that
Yeah.
actually mean though? Because I think when I've been, researching for this series and things, I spent like so much time on Reddit, and not in spaces where the agency owners or CEOs or operations managers would be hanging out, but where agency employees hang out. And I
Mm.
think there's definitely like, maybe like a reputation that agencies get for just being like, get in there, 40 billable hours a week, like no time for anything else. And there's kind of like a burnout culture. And I think the fact that you've managed to avoid that is fantastic. You're definitely in like the minority, not the majority. What do you think really goes into that and avoiding it? Is it looking at the manual workloads on a case by case basis and then pulling out data? You've just said, X has been really chugging
Mhm.
hard for that project for 3 months. Let's offer them some respite. What does burning the midnight oil mean to you And when does it get to a point where you're like, we need to step in here and kind of.
Yeah. I would say okay, so I'll just be super honest and transparent. I don't know that we've completely sidestepped that agency burnout culture. I
Okay.
wouldn't say that I would say that's definitely like it's still something that comes up. Like we do and but what I feel confident about is that we really try our best to sidestep that. And I would say that like w- we we call it kind of like a servant leadership style. Like all of our leaders are the first people, and myself included, the first people to step in and be like, hey, let me take that off your plate. I'll help you when people are feeling overwhelmed. But I wouldn't say that we have like completely like I wouldn't say that we've completely been like, oh, that's not a thing at Talk Shop. It definitely comes up and we try our best to be like, okay, how can we help you through it? Can you take a flex Friday and like work through it and kind of like yeah, just understand, like, where are you feeling burnt out? But to answer your question about burning the midnight oil, what I see is like, let's say it's a stat holiday here in Canada or even like over Christmas and you've got a client who's the CEO and founder and they're always working, like that is their business, that is their life. And then
seven
something's
days
come
a
up.
week.
Yeah, 24/7, and so you're trying to be your team is trying to take some time off and they're emailing you being like, "Hey, I want this like released or etc." Like that to me is one of those times where it's like that would feel like burnout to me or burning the midnight oil to me because it's like it's impeding on your time. Or I know that our team will wake up early to pitch specific, pieces of like specific like pitches and things for our clients and I don't understand exactly the catalyst behind those wake ups and those times. I'm not super nuanced in that, but I know it will happen. Or, we'll have like an after hours event, like we're helping someone launch a restaurant. And so we've got a team at the door. But what I will say is when those instances happen and it does, but I would like spill over the like normal work week, it's always a conversation, whether or not it ends up, with sort of like time in lieu or time gratis or et cetera. Again, based on the bigger picture, but it's always a conversation and someone is always there to chat through it with you, which I think is an anomaly.
I was just going to say that, like,
Mhm.
you're saying they can come to us and we'll chat about it. For me, that sounds like an anomaly. Just from the more conversations I have and the more kind of I dig into this world, that seems like you're in the minority on that. And the fact that people are comfortable coming to you and being like, Hannah, I was at that
Mhm.
restaurant open last night, burnt out, would love the Friday. The fact that
Mhm.
that conversation's open, I think
Mhm.
it just kind of shows that the values that we were talking about a couple of minutes ago,
Mhm.
that's them to life, right? So,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. That's it. I would say like we're not perfect, nobody is, and make no jokes at like or like mince I won't mince words, like agency life it's different. Like I'd never worked in an agency before and the pace of work is fast and there is a lot going on and there are a lot of balls in the air. Like I'll be the first to admit that, but what I think is different about Talk Shop and what I love is that we recognize that and we're like, "Okay, how can we set you up for success the best that we can, knowing that this is the environment that we work in. This is our choice to be in this type of industry." And I think there's so many beautiful things that come with an agency that sometimes get lost in the fold. Like we have such a dynamic mix of clients and there's so many interesting projects on the go. And I'm someone personally who thrives in a fast-paced environment. I would be bored to tears if I was working, in a government organization in my same role. So that it does work for people. I don't think that it's never to scare anyone away. Like it is a different environment, but it really works for some people and it's fun.
I
If
think
that's your type of
the mix
fun.
of projects is a
Mhm.
huge thing, especially if you're a creative or you like doing fast-paced work. You want different people coming to you to solve like different problems or launch something different or work on something different.
Mhm.
It's not fun to be like working in PR or a writer or whatever it is if you're just doing
Mhm.
the same thing and like
Yeah.
just doing template stuff. So I think that's an interesting way to look at it as well. If you are thriving on all that fast-paced work and you're getting to work on all this cool stuff, in
Mhm.
5 years they'll have this really cool portfolio if they want to move to another agency or open their own or whatever it
Totally.
is. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah.
So yeah, it's interesting to hear that even though you have such an emphasis on your people and employee workloads and stuff, how hard it is to solve, even if you're going into agency work with that mindset, right? It's just, I think you're right. I don't think it'll ever be solved. It's just something that you have to do your best at, because at the end of the day, you're still kind of selling people's time as a service, I guess, is kind of like the way to put it. So you still have to have some guardrails. And I'm just wondering, like, what kind of guardrails or utilization rates do you kind of aim for? Is there like a sweet spot that you aim for to make sure, people aren't getting burnt out, but the client work's still getting done?
Yep. We resource, and Toggle has been great for this. I'll do a shout out. We resource people at different levels of the business. We resource them a little bit differently in terms of billable time, knowing that our account associate team would be most heavily in client work. We aim for about an 85% billable rate, or sorry, billable 85% billable time.
Mm-hmm.
And we do resource on a 35-hour work week. So we kind of assume that there's an hour a day where you're having your lunch or taking a break or this or just unaccounted for, you know? So we start there, we work backwards from 35-hour work week, and then we tier out based on, based on position where that billable time falls. I think it's somewhere between 85 and sort of like 75, 70, depending on if an individual has like direct reports and they're more in that like management seat or not. And Toggle is great for that because for the first time, I think, versus our old time tracking software, we can get a really clear picture of where someone is at in terms of their billable versus non-billable time. And we've defaulted it in the system to be that every minute that goes to a client project is billable. We don't differentiate between client projects of billable, non-billable. We have a completely separate project called TSM non-billable that team would put their time into. So even if it's rare, but even if it was sort of client related, but it was non-billable, we just have them like build the agency for that in a sense.
Yeah, no, I get that. I'm just smiling because I was talking to another agency owner a couple of weeks ago, and he was saying he'd made this comment on LinkedIn about, he runs a branding agency, and if the creators are working on something for a brand, like it's getting billed, and someone said, well, are you going to bill them if they're looking at a mood board for inspiration? He's like, yeah, because it's client work. Like, of course, they're not going to be just looking at a mood board randomly for fun. Like, they're doing it for the client. So I found that kind of interesting in terms of, in my head, I thought billable hours would have to be, these final deliverable things. But do you break it down that granularly when you're trying to report to clients the work? Or
Sometimes I would
Mhm.
say um, it's definitely a gray area. I train people on Toggle when they onboard and how to track their time and what a time entry looks like and what are the components that we need. And there are times where I'm like, listen, I actually don't know where this would fall. Like if you
Mm,
are brainstorming for a client, they want to launch a product, for example, or a service, and they're coming to us for great ideas. Gray area for me. I'm like,
yeah.
I think it depends on the client and I think it depends on the situation. So sometimes that'll maybe be like categorized as billable time and sometimes it'll maybe be at the agency's expense. And I think it is like there is sort of like hit or miss and or even just like scanning the news looking for like creative angles, oh, this story landed has nothing to do with blah blah blah. Like I think of one of our clients is Poshmark. I don't know if I can say that actually. I'm sure I can.
We can cut it out.
Okay. One of our clients is Poshmark and we were pitching something for them. I can't remember what. And we took like a White Lotus spin on it. And it's like, if you weren't someone who watched the show, and maybe our team members did, but to kind of like delve in and be like, oh, okay, well, what's the angle within White Lotus? Like what's the pop culture references? Like what are the things or what are the nuggets that would like hook a reporter? To be honest, I don't know how I would track that. Because
Yeah.
it's like it's a little bit of both, and we are quite broad in how we categorize our time. So I would say that like it probably ends up being a little column A, a little column B. Like if you were to kind of look at a team member's account over or their time on an account over the entire spread of tasks that they have to do, probably falls somewhere a little bit like half the time to the client and half the time to us if you were to really distill it down, but we don't typically get that into it. We look at the tags, like we look at like, are we spending in like a disproportionate amount on client communication? And that way it kind of backs us up if the client is like, well, you haven't done anything for me. It's like, well, you've actually taken up 8 of our hours with a meeting. So it helps us
Yeah.
in that way to sort of like validate where we're at in terms of results. But we don't get super, super detailed with the client unless we like have to, I think.
Yeah, and I think I guess a way to look at it is if the deliverables awesome and they like it, all the creative work that goes into it, and I think it is a gray area when it is more of a you're trying to find stuff to hook a reporter or you're doing like creative or branding or whatever. I think that type of agency work is way more gray
Mhm.
is that a word, than doing kind of like SEO based or doing
Yes.
like, right, because that's we done this for 6 hours, here's the results. And it's kind of like
Mhm.
your White Lotus example.
Mhm. Mhm.
They might have
Yeah.
spent a couple of hours looking for that angle, because if they don't find the right angle, the project's not going to work. But I'm
Yeah.
assuming the project worked out fine if you're bringing it up.
Yeah, it was good. We did get some hits off that. I'm trying to think of some of the other ones. I'm very rarely like in the client work, so that's the
Yeah.
one that I know of. And we did a great pitch for Michael Hill, which is actually an Australian, yeah, jewelry.
Yeah, I know the brand. Yeah.
Um, and we did it was, I mean, I'm not sure if you've heard or, the world has probably heard about the economic uncertainties between Canada and the US that have
Hmm.
been, sort of a bit like whack-a-mole. Seems
Hmm.
to go away for a minute but comes back. And in the midst of all that, we did an amazing pitch for Michael Hill about Canadian diamonds because obviously we're focusing on the Canadian economy, et cetera. And
Hmm.
so that landed really, really well.
Nice.
That's part of like, I mean, I would say the expectation amongst team members is to be very aware of what's going on in the news and pop culture so that it doesn't take you 3 hours to be like, oh, this would land, this would hit. But also there's some cases where you're kind of like, well, I really don't know how I would pitch this to someone, or like, I'm really not sure how this would land. I might need to do a bit more research into like some real like niche threads.
Yeah. And I guess when you're tracking everything like that, maybe, like you said, you're not looking at it on a super granular level. But I guess if you're the idea behind tracking everyone and how long they're working on projects and how long, the average project takes, if you're tracking that from like a top level and just say you've got 30, 40 people, however many people you're tracking their time, does that help you from a top level sense say, hey, we really need to make a hire here that specializes in PR, or we really need someone to fill this gap because we're seeing more of these clients come in asking for this? Is that something that you use time tracking for and project management on a higher level, resource capacity management, to inform when you need to make a hire and who that hire needs to be?
I would say yes and no. Like, I
Okay.
would say that the data that comes in from Toggle definitely supports, I want to say, more anecdotal feeling. And I would say likely it's actually that like manual, like Google sheet that we have that
Hmm.
would reveal that quicker than what we track in Toggle. But Toggle is sort of the foundation, or the time tracked is the foundation or feeds into that like resource and capacity projection. But all of the information that we have from Toggle does support, I guess, like it's more so like reflection, I guess, on,
Hmm.
okay, well, we sold that to the client, X amount, we worked this much, this is sort of where it took us, or we're experiencing overages here. Like then we'll kind of look at that grid matrix and be like, okay, where do we need to adjust or change?
I was just going to ask, how much does it inform how you price things, how you price up retainers and stuff? Does that come into it at all? Like we thought project was going to take 50 hours, but it actually ended up taking X, or we couldn't finish it how we wanted to because it took longer.
Mhm.
Do you ever use time data to inform any of those decisions?
I would say we're working on it. It's definitely something that's a bigger conversation now because we have this amazing data. Like, so I would say that we're starting to.
Hmm.
I recently did a comparison of 20 of our accounts, and I looked at the profitability and sort of like time work, like profitability of what we charged the client versus labor cost thanks to Toggle. Where do we net out? And then I looked at that same data if we were to look at the way that Toggle is set up for the profitability report is, you worked 20 hours, let's say, at the billable rate of 225. Your team, the labor cost of those 20 hours worked is this, and then you compare and contrast that. That's how Toggle's set up. What it doesn't reflect is, like, in the first scenario, let's say we sold the client 25 hours and we were able to achieve our billable. And that's that is the reason of the retainer model, which I hope I'm not giving anything away. I'm sure people know this, but so if we do the work in 20 hours and we achieve the results that we want in 20 hours, we've billed them for 25 at 225, let's say. So the profitability skews slightly when you look at, version A versus version B. And then I did a version C, which is I went in and I edited the cost rates of individuals based on their tenure, experience, more of like a value billing system. And we compared and contrast those three. And it was really interesting, the spread, and like what we thought was going to be the case was not really the case. So we're starting to get into those conversations. And the only reason we can is because we have a system like Toggle, where one, you can manipulate labor and billable rates, and you have like the actual data that you can apply that manipulation to see, okay, what would that outcome have been? What would that outcome have been? So
and
yeah,
that's
we're
like
starting to get
impossible to
into that.
do, right? If you're not tracking it like that. And, I'm not just saying that because I like Toggle as well, but I
Yeah.
think it would be, especially for agencies, I just don't understand how you would do that kind of math if you had no idea about the actual hourly. So
Yeah, totally. And I would say that it's now becoming, again, because of the climate, and just everyone is very uncertain. I mean, I don't know if it's the same in Europe, but there's a real scare about a recession. And there are, everybody is really, I think, looking at all of their resources, both financial and, capital and people and all of it, with a wanting to understand the actual situation that they're in to batten down the hatches for what might come. But if you don't know where you're starting, impossible to plan for where you want to go. So I think that we are probably not unique in that we're like really starting to take a step back and look at some of that information. But we've only been with Toggle for just over a year. So I think now is
feels
like
like
the
a
right
lifetime.
time. Yeah. I know. It's like, what did we even do before?
Yeah, come on. No, I think it's definitely a theme that's been coming up in terms of battening down the hatches, but in terms of like really looking at getting the book out and right, let's look at the last 12 months. Maybe our clients aren't going to be comfortable if we raise their prices, but inflation's here and it's gone up by X%. And, our people are expecting a raise and we want them to stay. So then we have to and then that obviously eats into your margins. So it's definitely a conversation that I've been hearing more. So I guess on the back of that, apart from the profitability stuff that we've just talked about, what other metrics are you tracking on an ongoing basis to make sure everything is going where it should be, hitting the green?
We have we have a report that we call account efficiency. The three big reports that teams look at on a monthly basis, or three big KPIs, again, more at the group level, is that profitability report that I just talked about, and account efficiency. So, we had X amount of hours for the client this month. Where did we net out? Did we go over? Did we go under? Do we need to adjust moving forward, or do we need to ramp up? And then the third one is staff utilization. So kind of mirroring what we talked about at the beginning of the call, looking at how many hours were available to this individual and how many hours did they work, and what's the discrepancy there. So those are the three big KPIs that we look at. And each group has a portfolio of clients. Again, that's disseminating a little bit, but we're still looking at it like we have a manager that has, 10 clients. They're not really group one anymore, but there's still a portfolio of clients that we can look at with that individual. From like a macro level though, from like more of an agency and a leadership standpoint, I think we look at retention. I mean, we really focus heavily on the financials, I would say, and where we're like, just hitting revenue goals. That's primarily, I'd say, where we focus our attention. And then more qualitative stuff. And we're really working towards this year setting our KPIs and revisiting and revisiting and revisiting. I think that a challenge of the agency model sometimes is that everything moves so quickly and things change so quickly that it's easy to be distracted or focus on a fire that comes up instead of being like, oh, I got to look. Wait, we said we were going to do this. What are we going to look at? And for me, this coming year, I have set out on this big crusade of automations and integrations. So I have a rough barometer and metric of time I would like to save the employees. I don't know if that is even possible because I haven't really benchmarked anything yet, but that's my KPI that I'm personally going to be coming back to this year is sort of like what systems have like started talking to each other that did not talk to each other before, and how are we setting up and automating some of those manual tasks for some of our team. And yeah, that's my KPI this
That's
year.
Hannah's KPI.
Mhm.
What do you think is just interesting? Because I was going to ask you about AI before we finish up, but I guess it might fall into that in terms of like the automations and the integrations you're looking at. What do you think you're going to be able to shave off the top there in terms of like automations and tasks and things? Do you know yet? Are you at that point?
I don't know just yet. I have a
Mm-hmm.
hunch. I have two hunches. One, I think that we're going to be able to drastically streamline our workflow of media list building, finding journalists, pitching, and tracking that, like truly what the clients are coming to us for.
Mm-hmm.
Not all clients, but some. Really streamline that because we have a great new like pitching software or PR software that we're
Mm-hmm.
super excited about and that integrates with Gmail. So that I know we will do well in just saving the team time. I'd say by and large, from the sort of like associate to the manager level, the biggest time suck for them is creating media lists, finding the appropriate journalists, and then doing like pitching. So we found something that really does streamline that. I also think that there's two other areas that I think that we're going to be able to save and make great improvements in. One is just the sheer introduction of a project management system. Right now, we're a little bit all over the place in terms of how we manage our projects, largely done in Slack. But as we continue to grow and the teams continue to work like this versus like this, I see the need for just like a centralized place that will alleviate the administrative follow up. Hey, where are you at with this task? What do you need for me to complete it? Are we on track? Are we off track? I would imagine as a manager, having to go to 7 different client Slack channels to figure that out might be a little overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my hunch. And then the third hunch in the AI world is I think we might be able to recognize some efficiencies, especially in the media monitoring realm. There's a really interesting software out of Australia, actually, that I had a demo with that, if set up correctly, I don't know if I'm the person to set it up correctly, but if set up correctly, could alleviate a lot of time spent searching for some of those coverage clips that we spend a lot of time like finding for our clients. Even though we know that they've landed, like if we know we got a story in the Financial Post on this day, the monitoring softwares as they are now, it's yes and no in terms of how easy that clip or that piece of coverage is to find. Sometimes it's great. Sometimes it does like actually take up a lot of the team's time.
Just a question on the first one that you were going to about the new pitching software that you hope to
Mhm.
introduce and how it's going to save hours. Just say you've got a client on, you might not even want to answer this, so I can cut it out after if you want. But just say you've got a client on a 20-hour retainer, and normally you would like hash out maybe 2 or 3 hours for them to build the list and pitch and things. And then all of a sudden that's shrinking. Are you
Mhm.
keeping the retainer the same hourly and cost and then
I would
filling that with
say
something else?
yes. And filling it with like what we want to encourage our team to do is think strategically.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very hard to do when you're a task monkey, and when you're burning out your time. So yes, and maybe we do cut this because I was like, I don't know if this is something that you would want to hear, but I think, well, here's what I think. One, everything that we've been hearing from like agencies at large in North America and also from our clients and watching the trends of our clients is that oftentimes we're brought in as a strategic partner. And that's really where our value is going to shine. We understand what will move the needle and what is going to be effective for clients. And I think by encouraging our team and wanting our team to take a step back and be like, it took you 15 minutes to pitch that out, but that was the best, most succinct pitch to the right people that's going to land the right coverage. And that's
Mm-hmm.
what's important to the client. I think that is going to pay off in spades for both parties. But it will shift some of the time from doing to thinking and making sure that this is actually what the client is coming to us for, because it does run the gamut. Some people don't want just, X amount of articles and X amount of places. Some people are really looking to us to be like, no, I need a strategic communications plan, or maybe they're more of an internal communications client. Really runs the gamut. But freeing up that time for our team to understand like what is the why and the need of the client, from just being like, oh, I need to get coverage, so I'm going to pitch out, this pitch that's going to take me 2 or 3 hours. Yeah. So I think it's yes that we would shift that time into something else. I would imagine we'd be keeping, the retainer the same, but delivering more strategic work and more impactful work on both sides.
I'm just smiling because it kind of, feel like that just links up with what you were talking about right at the start of the chat with having like people knowledgeable in certain specific areas. If you're just doing like pay and spray, just like, yeah, we can put a press release out onto the wire. It's kind of like, okay, but if you've got all these people in TalkShop that are really, knowledgeable in a certain area, they will already know what that will look like. So, and the reason I'm bringing that up is because it seems like the plans that you have are going to make space for them to have this kind of more strategic thinking. They don't feel like they're under this crazy amount of pressure to do all these things and have this list, that'll all be taken care of. So then they can focus more on, targeted strategy. So I just thought it was a fun way to link it up to what you're saying at the start of the chat. I just had one more kind of broad question just to round it out, maybe a little bit philosophical, but okay. If you could go back maybe 12 months ago to where you were in TalkShop, and if you could give yourself a piece of advice on like an operational change that you would have made to make your life easier, make your team's life easier, kind of like alleviate a bit of, the workload pressure, what is one change that you would have made? Hopefully you can give a bit of broad advice to people that are trying to alleviate a bit of burnout on their own teams.
Okay, I'm trying to think back. So April 2024. I'm trying to think, where were we? You're like 6 months into the US. Okay, the one thing that has really made it different. Okay, it wasn't available then, so it's hard to say, or maybe it was in its very infancy stages, but the one operational change that I would have made sooner or looked for sooner was a feature in Slack, actually. It's called Slack Canvas. And it was basically just this, it's a blank canvas that you attach to a client channel, but it keeps all of that information central. So what was the proposal? What's the agreement and signed agreement that we have with the client? What are their motivators? What are their goals? What are their drivers? Who are the client contacts? Who's the team? Like it's crazy that it's so simple, but that I think is one thing that I wish I would have done sooner, because in lieu of a project management system, I think we could have probably made bigger strides as we like migrated to this one agency model sooner, had we developed that sooner. Just a centralized place of information.
I think it's a good answer, because I think, people tend to, especially with AI and things, people are like, we can do this or build out the bot and do this and that. And then it's kind of like, I think a lot of people are still working with systems that require a lot of task switching, a lot of like spreadsheets and things. So everyone on LinkedIn is talking about AI all the time. And there's still kind of bread and butter things that I think would really help if you just change them. So I really like that answer, because I think if you had, all this stuff spread out across heaps of different channels, that takes a long time to go and I'll just go get that document. Well, who knows? You have to go and search for it. So I like it. I like the answer.
Yeah, right. Low-hanging fruit.
Yeah.
I've got mixed emotions about AI. I will be honest. I don't think it's a solve for everything, but yeah, low-hanging fruit, and that would definitely be my wish, or what I would have imposed on myself last year.
Hey, I don't hate AI. I just think it's being used as like, we should use AI for this, and this. And it's, yeah, but there's a little bridge in between the spreadsheet or whatever to get to there. So let's just like build the bridge first.
Don't get me started on clean data. I could talk forever. Once I realized that this was a problem, I'm like, God, this is such a problem.
You fell down the well.
Yeah. Anyways, I could go on and on, but
episode 2.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Stay tuned.
All right. Let's round it off. Hannah, why don't you tell people where they can find yourself and where they can find TalkShop Media?
Oh my gosh. Okay. TalkShopMedia.com. And you can find us across North America with hubs in Toronto, Vancouver, and LA. Also our socials, TalkShop Media on Instagram, and I'm going to sound like a terrible agency person. I think X for sure.
No one's on X anymore.
Definitely Facebook. And TalkShopMedia.com is the best spot. I'm on LinkedIn, although I'm not very active.
Hey, we'll get you some followers.
Yeah. Hannah McClenaghan, and I'm not going to give you my personal Instagram because it is it's very much a reflection of me.
We'll save it for episode 2.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, Hannah. Thanks so much.
Okay. Thank you so much, Kimberly.